How's everybody doing on a Saturday afternoon? Are you totally worn out yet? I'm going to see if I can get this to work. I'm not sure if it will. I should have plugged this in already. Won't matter if I do. I'm going to stand here behind this podium because I'm pretty comfortable with that, so I won't do a lot of walking around, and we're going to talk really, really fast. And that way, if we finish early and you don't have just a plethora of questions, we might be done 2 or 3 minutes before time. So we'll see where we go from there. We're going to talk about data today. We've had a lot of requests from people across the state. What do I do with data? How do I analyze the data? How do I make the data effective for me? And I'm going to be honest with you, I can't tackle that in 50 minutes. So we're going to do the best we can. What I intend to do, this is sort of a part one talk, and I'm going to put this online as an online video discussion. And when I do that, I'll include part two, and I'll give that link to Bethany Bowman at PET, and maybe we can get that sent out to everybody in case if you are interested in what you hear today, then maybe you'll want to hear part two, where we kind of go into some other local kinds of things. So we're gonna start today by just talking about the fact that most systems have some type of program in place. Most school districts have some type of program in place where you are collecting data. You're taking tests, you're doing formative assessments. The big one for Tennessee, I think, is discovery assessment. I think they're in about 80% of the school districts in Tennessee the last time I checked on that. And that's my favorite tool. Other people are using, you might be going to the Khan Academy, or maybe you have Plato Learning or Odyssey-ware. Maybe you're just using Accelerated Reader, Accelerated Math. Maybe you're using SuccessMaker, the STAR program. But in there, you're getting information of student results that it's giving you some kind of idea where your students are. And what I want to do is talk to you a little bit today about how these programs operate and tie that to the assessments that you're doing yourself in your classroom. Because there are things that we need to be doing with our own assessments to collect valuable data that many, many, many teachers are not doing. If we are instructed in the team rubric or other rubrics across the state to be looking at student mastery, then we have to be able to know that the data we're actually collecting in the classroom is leading us down the path to understanding student mastery. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go along. So what I'd like to do very first thing is for us to take a quiz together. Is that okay? If you have, I see some heads going like this. No, that's too bad. We're going to do it anyway. So if you have a laptop out, or if you have an iPad, or if you have a smartphone, if you will go to this website right here. If you have a QR code reader, you can just scan that picture up at the top. If you don't, type in m.socrative.com. I have a short quiz I would like for you to take. The first 2 questions, even though it will tell you that it's graded, they're not graded. But I put them in there to give me some information, and I'll just tell you all the women in the room are going to get one of those wrong, okay? So just understand the first couple of questions, we're not really interested right now in your total score. I would ask that as you go through, if you're just super confident you've got everything right, at least miss the last question for me. Try to miss one, okay? And then if you miss like 9 of them, you could just say, well, I tried to do that. So I'm going to come out here to this website. Oh, by the way, when you get to msocrative.com, it's going to ask you for a room number. That's the room number, 31215. 31215. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, and I'm going to start this test, because if you're already in there, it's saying, I'm waiting for your teacher to do something. All right, so in Socrative, I have I have the choice of making a student-paced quiz, which means it's going to automatically go to the next question as soon as you answer one, or I have the choice of making this a teacher-paced quiz so that everybody stays on the same question until I'm ready to move to the next question. So I'm going to make this a student-paced quiz, and it should open up, and it will tell me that I have 17 people in the room already, and then it's going to show me down here how many of those people, actually I'm at 20 now, it's growing, that's good, you decided this is not going to kill you. And I can display live results. I'm not sure that I want to do that right now, but I'm going to throw this up here for just a second, and then we may hide it for a moment. Okay? So some of you have actually used your name. That's very brave of you. All right? I'm going to throw this back up here. Well, no, I'm not either. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay over here so I know when everybody's done. I don't want to move on. Let's hide the live results for a moment. So as you're going through the quiz, there's a couple of math questions, there's a couple of social studies questions, there's a couple of language arts questions. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I will, but you can't take it you can't take it unless you have that. So if you have an iPad and you're online, you can do it there. If you have a laptop out, if you have a smartphone, but if not, we'll go through it. I'm just looking at collecting some data. The quiz is not necessarily important. I just want to show you some data. And so I thought I would just randomly select some. So as you go through, keep in mind that the vast majority of these questions are like middle school level, so you can expect to miss a few, okay? But this will tell me, I also wanted to just kind of show you Socrative. This is one of my favorite little online testing, quizzing, exit ticket sites that we use at our school. And it's telling me now I have 25 people in the room. Right now, I don't have anybody that's finished the quiz, but it will start putting numbers up there as you finish the quiz. It was going to tell you when you get a question right and when you get a question wrong. So obviously, the answer to the first question, are you a male or a female, is defaulted to male because I made the quiz. But we're not going to count that as an answer, okay? I wouldn't ordinarily ask that question. But I wanted to gather that information. It was the only way I could do it without knowing you personally. And then there's one about how many years have you been in the teaching profession. I had to choose one to be the correct answer. There really is no right or wrong answer there, so don't worry about that. The rest of them are real questions, taken from real tests, and they count, okay? So if you'll go through there, I see I've got one already finished. That's great. I'll wait till we get about half of them finished, and then I'll start moving on while everybody else is finishing up. It's okay if you don't take this as a type A teacher where you have to overanalyze every question. It's really not that important, okay? I have some friends like that. They're like, oh my gosh, I might have to get out my calculator for this. No, you don't really have to do that. I just want the data. That's all I want. And I wanted you to see Socrative. So we have 5 now that have finished the quiz. And when you finish the quiz, you can go ahead and close out of the program. You're not going to see anything else there on the student module. I'll show you the answers when we get up here sort of to the top. We'll see where we're at. One of the things about Socrative is, and a lot of programs like this online, when I'm finished with this quiz, I can download the results as an Excel file. So I have live data from a quiz that I can now go in and sort of analyze and manipulate and see where I'm at. So I just chose some random questions. I didn't try to do this like any kind of make sense of this kind of thing. And we're up to 11. I'll wait for a couple more, and then we'll go back to the presentation for a little bit, and we'll come back to Socrative in a little while. Yeah, we're starting to roll now. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna come back over here, and we're gonna come back up here again. So Socrative.com, it's a free website. You can sign up as a teacher. Students don't need an email address. They just need your room number, and your room number is the same. You're assigned a room number, it's always your room number. All right, so when we're looking at test data, this is sort of, especially the tests that we do in class, this is sort of where all of the attention lies. How many did you get right, and how many did you get wrong? What was your score? Did you make a 94? Did you squeeze through to an A? In our system, 93 to 100, I think, is an A. Maybe that's statewide, I don't know. And that seems to be where the kids are most interested. Did I make an A? Did I make a B? Did I make anything higher than the person sitting next to me that I always have to outscore? Parents want to know, why did my kid get a 75 and not an 85? They're always concerned with the score. And that's the least important thing we can look at. It is absolutely the least important thing. All right, so when we think about data, for us as teachers, better data for us is, what do the subgroups look like? Which is why I asked you to identify whether you were male or female. That's the subgroup we're going to look at. If I were a classroom teacher, I would have a list of subgroups. I would know which students are male and female. I would know which students are Caucasian or African American or Hispanic or American Indian or Asian Pacific or other. I would know which students are regular ed and which students are special ed. I would know all those things, and I could make that in my Excel sheet to be able to sort of look at the data. How am I doing? Am I doing better teaching the boys than I am the girls? Am I doing better teaching the African American students in my class than I am the Asian kids in my class? So we start looking at subgroups. That's better. But we can also dig deeper into what we're talking about, what we're looking at. And that's sort of what I want to outline for you today, is give you a sort of a firsthand knowledge of how a lot of these questions are structured so that you know you're asking the right kinds of things. And so we need to understand, I'm not just collecting right and wrong answers. I'm collecting data almost every day. If I can collect it electronically, I've saved myself a lot of work. But if I collect it on a pencil paper test, I can create what I need to be able to look at the data. It's just not as handy, all right? So I want to talk about, just briefly, about 3 kinds of questions that you're going to find on pretty much any assessment that you look at. Discovery assessment, benchmarks, success maker questions, Plato type questions, study island questions, TCAP questions, and more than likely Common Core questions. Although I haven't seen a lot of those yet, I'm working on that now. One is the easy question, okay? There is a select group of questions in every standardized test that we would represent as easy questions. And an easy question is something like this. Which one of these is not a Beatles song? All right, so how many of you think it's A? Really? How many of you think it's B? C? D? Okay, so D is the right answer. All right, so as we think about that question, an easy question is one of those types of questions where the right answer jumps off the page. The other 3 distractors don't really distract us. And it's one of the types of questions that teachers write the most. They don't know they're writing them the most, but they do. We give the kids the answer when we write the question. We put a neon sign around the letter that says, this is the right one. All right? Another one is this. In a multiple choice test, when is the longest answer the correct answer? All right? Is it rarely? Is it sometimes? Or it's almost always the correct answer, and it's often stuff with new information that should have gone into the main part of the course, but we forgot. So now we're putting it in the quiz because we can't possibly leave out the tiniest detail? Or is it occasionally? How many of you think it's C? Yeah, it's C. So here's one of the things. Listen, well, I'm not going to ask that. I started to ask how many of you in here work for the State Department, but I'm not going to ask that. I don't want to know. I'm just going to put my job on the line, all right? I just did the recertification for the team evaluation thing to go out and evaluate teachers. And we have to watch a video, and the video that I chose, lucky me, was an hour long. And then we have to answer questions about that video. And so I was sitting there and I was looking at a question. I didn't even read the question. It looked like this. Maybe not quite like that, but it was close to that. I chose the longest answer. It was right. I didn't even read the question. I know it was right because I made 100 on the test. Okay? That's how I know. Sorry? Oh, it tells me at the end. Okay? It gives me a score at the end. So, so, I mean, this is just what we do. We don't even know we're doing it, but we're writing easy questions. Now, this is not always the correct answer, okay? But most of the time, if it's there, you'll find it is. The other way we write easy questions is, when should you choose all of the above? Is it when you know that A and B are correct, but you're not sure about C? Or when you know B and C are correct, but you're not sure about A? Or is it when you know A and C are correct, but you have questions about B? Or is it all of the above? I hope you know it's all of the above. All right, so all of the above is a wasted question. None of the above is a wasted question. You know when I use them, I won't throw stones except at myself. When I used all of the above and none of the above was when I couldn't think of another distractor to put in the question. Honest. Because I was lazy. I was writing a bad test. All right, so these are easy questions. They're questions that we sort of tell kids when we write them, hey, here's the right answer. All right? So the other kind of question that we write are the moderate difficulty questions, the medium difficulty questions. And you'll find that most of the questions on standardized tests fall into this category. Most of them. And it's one of those questions where you can eliminate two choices without even thinking, without even reading. And I wish I had put it up here without even putting up the question. I wish I'd done that, but I didn't. But I will before I do this again, because I think that would be a great idea. I'm rewriting this as I go. All right, so we're looking at pronouns. Here's a question. Choose the sentence below that uses pronouns correctly. Now, I could agonize over this, if that's what I chose to do, or I could just notice that two of the answers use the word I, and two of the answers use the word me. If I can figure out if either one of those two are wrong, I know it's one of the other two. I can eliminate two choices without really doing much work. And this happens a lot in algebra, which is why I don't understand why our kids have so much trouble with algebra. Because we'll throw up a slope and ask them if it's positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, undefined slope, whatever. And the angle of the line tells you what it is. I mean, you just know. Okay, so in this regard, we're writing a medium level question. And most of the questions, I cannot emphasize this enough, most of the questions we write fall into this category. Most of the questions that are on the TCAP have fallen into this category. All right? The other is the hard question. The hard question, where all of the options seem to be equally plausible. These are really difficult questions to write. They're hard, okay? And I didn't write this one, but I thought it sort of fit. So which of the following is a statement of fact? Fear Street books are scarier than Goosebumps books. Dr. Seuss and Lois Linsky wrote books that many children enjoy. Judith Vorst and Robert Frost are both good poets. Shel Silverstein is a more creative poet than T.S. Eliot. Now, if you're an English teacher like I am, that answer jumps off the page. But if you're a student and you don't really understand the difference between opinion and fact yet, this is a difficult question. All right? I'm not going to ask, now that I've posed the question that way, I'm not going to ask you how many of you think it's A, B, or C, or D, because you'll be like, oh, wow, it's really stupid. And I don't want to do that. So just understand that this is the right answer. The other three are all opinion statements. But to a student, they have to really think about that. They have to understand the difference between opinion and fact, or they're going to guess it wrong. They have to know the material. That's the point I'm trying to make. They have to know the material to get it right. So we've got easy questions, we've got moderate questions, we've got hard questions. And if we are interested in student mastery over student grades, and I'll be honest with you, it's a hard difference. Because with student grades, we love it when everybody in our class makes an A. And then suddenly we've got 30% of our class that's below basic. How do they make an A in my class and do below basic on the TCAP? Is it because they had a bad day? Or is it because I've been assessing with bad tests? Was I not paying attention to the data? Now, I don't mean that to be hard. I'm just telling you the road that I traveled when I became a teacher. I wrote some really bad tests. And the test scores on the standardized test did not match up with what kids in my class were doing. And then I went 180 degrees the other way and wrote some really, really hard tests. Failed half the kids in the class. That's when the phone calls started. Okay, so I had to find a happy medium. And so I started looking at what is the TCAP doing? And this was back when, as the keynote speaker this morning was talking about Texas, you know, Tennessee, you used to be proficient in Tennessee if you got 33% of the questions correct. 33%. We wouldn't do that in the classroom. But here's part of the reason why that is. And even now that we're looking at harder, more strict, rigorous standards, harder curriculum, those kinds of things, this is still true on the TCAP test. About 25% of the questions are easy questions. About 50% of the questions are medium questions. And about 25% are hard questions. So if we can, first of all, what I did with my kids was I taught them how to read questions as much as teaching them how to parse sentences. And so if you can answer the easy and medium questions, you're already at 75%. You're already proficient. To get to advanced, you've got to be able to answer those hard questions. Because it's the hard questions that separate the kids who are able to guess the question pretty accurately, which is what I do, and the kids who really know the material. Pretty much, if you give me a test on anything, whether I've read it or not, whether I've studied it or not, I can make a B on the test. Because I know how to dissect the questions. And so when I was in high school, you know, why bother to read the textbook? Why bother to study? I already knew what the answers to the questions were going to be in my head. I knew how to do the game. Because nobody was asking me these 25% hard questions. So when I got to college, left in my sophomore year with a 1.67 GPA after having all A's and B's in high school. So we have to know, when we're collecting this data, we have to know that the data is meaningful to us. Okay? So if I ask an easy question and I've got 3 kids in my class that can't answer the easy questions, that's telling me a lot. If I have made 50% of my test to be really, really hard questions and everybody fails it, that's telling me something. Okay? So we've got to learn how to write the questions better. We've got to learn how to write the test better, get the data that we're really interested in. And so when we're writing these tests, you're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. if we look at it in this hierarchy of percentage questions, if we look at our questions realistically and we say that about 25% of the questions on this test, it's a 10-question quiz. We're talking 2 questions, 2 to 3, are easy questions, easily identified. And about half the questions on my test look at something a little more difficult in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. And that's where you get the differentiation of the answer types. And about 25% of my test is up here where they have to know the material to be able to tell me an answer. They can't guess at this stuff. And you'll find that in the Common Core, when it's asking kids to write out how they got there, how did they find this answer, what steps did they take, we're looking at this top layer here a lot. So when we think about tests, just making sure you're still awake. When we think about tests and we think about collecting data, we've got to be able to look at the data in some meaningful manner. So the last thing that I'll mention about tests, and then we'll go back to the data that I have, and let me just check my timer here. Oh, okay. I'm doing all right. The other thing that we have to think about is, have you actually spread out your answers? You know, we don't tell kids on the standardized test, always choose C, because C is most often correct. We tell them always choose C because you've got 25% chance of guessing it correctly. Because on the standardized test, there's about an equal number of A's, B's, C's, and D's. Pretty evenly spread out. Not exact, but pretty evenly. And if you're guessing, jumping all over the map, you have 0 chance of guessing correctly. But if you constantly choose C, at some point, it's going to cross that path and you're going to just luck into a correct answer. So, I mean, that's why we do it. So you need to look and say, look at your test very quickly and say, did I put C down? Because listen, we try to hide the answer in the middle. That's what we do. And you will find out if you go back and look at some of your tests, maybe not this past year, but if you go back and look at a test you made 5 years ago, you're going to find B and C are most often your correct answers because you think you're giving it away if it's A or B. And really what you're doing is just training your students to think about B and C. So we have to mind those gaps. All right, so let's go back very quickly to Socrative. Now, I'm doing this on the fly. This is not pre-planned as far as I don't know what the data is here. This may totally blow my whole theory today. If it does, I'm sorry, you don't get your money back. We're still in there. All right. Okay, so I have all of these people who scored in that. Let's see if I can at least make that big enough where you can kind of see it a little better. All right, so we have people here who obviously took me at face value and they attempted to answer some questions incorrectly. Understand that every woman in the building, if you actually claim that you're a woman, you got one question wrong. Okay, so just understand that. And if you have not been in education from 11 to 20 years, you got that question wrong, because that's how long I've been in education. All right, so those two were just there. We're not really counting them, but this is kind of the results that I get. And so you'll see that over here on the far right, it tells me how many out of 10 people got right. Now, that's as far as we go most of the time. Oh, that's an 80. Let me write that down in the grade book. That's a 60. Let me write that down in the grade book. You know, that's 100. Oh, you did really good today. All right, so I'm going to, I think I am going to end this activity, and I'm going to download the report. Dun, dun, dun. All right. This is where we get to see exactly what it is we have. I think I opened it twice, but that's okay. All right, so if I were, I think I can stretch through this okay. It's not letting me go any bigger. All right, so we're going to do this. There we go. We're going to just a little bigger. So this tells me in green that the answer is correct. It tells me in red the answer is wrong. If I come up here, I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff right here because this will make it easier for me to do what I want to do. So let's delete those. And I want to come right here and I want to put in a filter. Okay, so now I can say I want to just look at the female answers in my group. How did they do? Well, you know, obviously they all got that question wrong, okay? But if I come over here to the square root of 144, everybody got it right except one student, all right? If I come over here on the amendment, I have a little more of a problem there, all right? So I'm going to say, how many females chose A? So I have this many students that chose A. And then I have this many students that chose B. B was not a very good distractor for me. And then I have this many students that chose C. C wasn't very good for me either. And then I have this many that chose the correct answer. Now what this tells me is, if this were a real test, first of all, A seems to be a really good distractor for me. B and C, not so much. Is there anything I can do to the way this test is structured to make B and C more believable that will increase the difficulty of my question? If I had to guess, I would say most people that did not know chose A because it was the first answer, be my guess. So the other thing this question tells me is that when it comes to females in my class, most of them got this wrong. Okay? So let's go back and let's look at all of these again. And let's change this to the males in my class. I don't have that many that participated. Okay? And you'll see that I have, even though I have very few males that actually, or maybe you just didn't claim you were a male. I don't know. But you'll see out of the 5 men that took this test, 3 of them got it wrong. So I know immediately on this particular thing that obviously most people in this group are not social studies, government, civics teachers. All right? Do you know which amendment the 18th Amendment was that got repealed? Prohibition. Okay? At least we know that. So if I had labeled the answers, probably everybody would have got it right. If I told you what the amendments were. All right, so I made it a little more difficult by giving you the numbers. All right, so I'm just looking at the data that I have available. And so over here with, I'm still looking at just the men. All right, which of the following questions are written correctly? Again, I have 2 guys that got that wrong, or got it right, 3 guys that got it wrong. It's a different 2 guys, though, not the same 2 guys, different 2 guys. So maybe they're doing okay in social studies, but they're not doing okay in language arts. All right, and then this would be good. This was strictly a math question on the volume of the cube. So I'm going to guess and say that this one guy that got this wrong probably chose that one to be wrong because we're guys and we know numbers. All right. So if I come back over here and I choose females, and I come over here to the volume of the cube, I see most of them had it correct, but I have a few, I have about 4 that missed that question. Now, I don't need to go back and reteach the cube to everybody. I have 4 students who might need a little bit of refresher in cubic volume. So now I'm differentiating instruction when I'm done. I could do the same thing looking at this data by looking at different either regular ed or special ed, a racial mix. How am I doing with those? I could also code my students in my Excel sheet from last year's TCAP data. In English, this student was advanced. These 5 students were proficient. These were below basic. I could code that. And in this Excel sheet, I can go back and say, all right, these are the kids that were below basic last year. How are they doing now? Are they getting the questions? Do they understand what's going on? I can pinpoint those kids. I can do that in Discovery Assessment. I can do that in Study Island. I can do that in Plato. I can do that in Success Maker. I can do that in Accelerated Reader. I can do all that automatically. But when I'm creating the test, when I'm creating the quiz, I have to understand whether my quiz is being successful or not. And that has to go way beyond, did you get an A, a B, C, or a D? Okay? So, excuse me, bless you. So let's pause for just a moment, all right? Let's take some questions. I got questions later, but let's pause for just a moment. What's going on in your head right now? Is this anything new to you? Is this like old stuff you learned back in college that you just maybe forgot about, or you do this every day? Is there something else you need to know? What kind of questions do you have right at the moment? Yes, sir.
I teach high school, and I gave the U.S. history and the course test. I can't get the data to find out how if they did well in one era and not so well in another era, so I know to change the way I teach. It's not available to me.
You don't have any kind of benchmarking available to you through your district?
No. They just give me the raw numbers.
But I mean, you don't have some kind of benchmark you're going through like 2 or 3 times a year to kind of assess where your kids are along the way, like a discovery assessment or?
Yeah, I'm saying on the end of course tests. There's no way to know if I did a better job of teaching in one area than another area.
Okay.
Because they don't provide me with the data. That would, if they could provide us with that information, it would make it easier to adapt our teaching.
Right. Right, and this is kind of where I want to go with the second half of this, which I'm going to put online as soon as the data is not embargoed anymore. So I want to look at real data. When you go online, as I recall, it's been a couple of years since I've had to do this in the classroom, but as I recall, when you go online to look at the test data, you're going to see a few things about the kids that you claim on your test. And one of the most important things I think that you'll see is the quintile report. Are you familiar with that report? Okay. They will divide your results up into 5 sections of results as far as the makeup of your class goes. The bottom 20%, then another 20, then another 20, then another. So it's in a quintile. And it will show you in that quintile of who those students were expected to be, where you are reaching. If you're teaching to the middle performers of your group, if you're getting better results with the high performers, or if your great results are down here with the low performers, it will sort of break it out that way for you a little bit. The test data that you get back, it doesn't break that down by this is my first year in high school, so I'm afraid I don't have an answer. I don't know the answer to this, but it doesn't give you like the areas of instruction within that subject. It just gives you an overall score.
Somebody may have it, but we don't get it.
Okay. Okay. So in the 2 tests that we're really hammering home, we do that. And obviously, we don't have enough money to do it in the other tests. So can we take that out of the video? Social studies always gets a bad rap. It does. And in middle school, it got a bad rap. It's the only subject that didn't change standards. Why? So anyway, yeah. I'm going to give you my contact information here in just a little bit. Shoot me an email about that, and let me kind of dig around and see what I can find that might give you more information on that line. You have a question down here? Right, and you can do that in DE. If there's not a tested subject in there, you can make your own tests and add those questions and sort of disaggregate it in your own report. It's a little cumbersome to do that, but I've done that several times myself. Yeah, so you would need to know the answer to that of where are they at. Hopefully, and this is going to be a Hail Mary answer, okay? But hopefully along the way, you've sort of determined by the assessments that you give, and I'm not talking about chapter tests, but if you're giving assessments along the way, one assessment, one standard per assessment, so that you know exactly where your students are in that standard, then before they go into that test, you're going to have a pretty good idea of where their weaknesses are as a class. What you have available to you to go back and remediate that, I don't know. That changes from district to district. But here's the thing: is if we're just looking at a 20-question test at the end of the chapter, or 50 questions, or 150 questions, like my systematic theology class, 200 questions, then we've sort of missed it anyway. When we're giving those small tests along the way, 5 questions, just 5 questions that cover one standard, the standard that you just taught. Whether you grade it, don't grade it, whether it goes in the grade book, doesn't go in the grade book, look at the results. Okay? Take that one standard and write a couple of easy questions, a couple of moderate questions, and one really hard question. And then compare those results to what you know from past TCAP data, what you know from their grade in the class, whatever. But you've honed in on that standard. You might even get away at times of doing 2 or 3 standards, as long as you know which standard each question is going to cover. Maybe make a 15-question quiz. But if your test is zeroed in, if your quiz is zeroed in to that area, that will help you a lot along the way to know, okay, they understand this. They don't understand this. In something like Plato, they're only going to get asked 10 questions for mastery. They got to answer 8 of them correct. All right, so if you do 5 and they've answered 4 questions correct, they're probably doing okay. But if they got 2 of them wrong, they might not have it yet. Yes, sir. Yeah, and here's the other thing, something you just said kind of spawned this in my head. Here's another thing about if you do have benchmark tests, like discovery assessment, which is what we use, keep in mind that just because they're proficient on the assessment, on the benchmark, does not mean they're going to necessarily be proficient on the final end of course test. It's not a one-to-one correlation. There's a standard deviation that kid falls in. And if the standard deviation is such that it can fall either inside or outside proficient, if they're along that line, all we're saying is that we're 95% sure that if this kid took this test again, it's going to fall somewhere within this band. Could be proficient, could be basic. So, and the same kind of thing, if you're really going to get serious about the data in your class, you got to start looking at those kinds of things as well. But when you don't have a very big sample number, those are difficult to do. But I've had a lot of teachers tell me, well, I didn't like the discovery assessment test because it said this kid's going to be proficient. They weren't proficient. No, it didn't tell you that. It said that within this realm of standard deviation, there's a good possibility that kid's going to fall within this group of scores, and they did do that. So, and I do understand that some of the things that are online from the state test are not going to tell you everything you want to know, which is why I didn't go there. Because by the time you give them the state test, it's too late. Now you're doing an autopsy. And the autopsy is important. Don't get me wrong. We need to do the autopsy. But we also need to know where we are week to week. I do find, I think, in our own school, that in most subjects, girls are outperforming boys on GPA. I don't know if that's because they're more apt to apply themselves to study. I don't know if guys are just not interested yet in studying. It's an interesting thing for me being a middle school teacher because I had 7th and 8th grade, and when I would look at these kids, I would think, oh my God, you're never going to be anything, ever. And I mean, these kids, they would flunk out. They were not interested. But then when they got to 10th grade, and 10th grade, they started getting into their elective classes and found something they loved, which we can't offer in middle school. It's band, it's choir, it's art, it's Spanish. That's it. When they found something they love, suddenly they just flourish. And they have a purpose to education again. And I look at these kids when I walk through the high school hallways, and I'm like, who are you? Did an alien take over your body? Because you're not the student that was in my 8th grade class. This hair came from you. So I don't know if, I say that because I don't know if the guys are maturing there slower. I don't have an answer about the difference in GPA. Other questions? I'll get to my question slide now. Officially, do we have questions? Because I'm about done. If you want to find me, here's a few ways to get in touch with me. I don't have the answers to a lot of things. In fact, I know very little when it comes right down to it. But I'm a good researcher. And if you have a question you'd like for me to help you find an answer to, I will do my dead level best to do that. It's part of why I became an educator, is to do this kind of stuff, to help teachers be better teachers, if at all possible. So if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at @tchilders. I do ask, if you have a Twitter account, please make sure you have a picture of you on your profile and something in there that says you're a teacher. Otherwise, I'm not going to know who you are, and I'm not going to follow you back, okay? Because I'm going to think you're out to hack me, and I don't need that. My email address is there, timothy.childers@knoxschools.org. And then if you want to find me on Facebook, it's just tim.childers. If you send a friend request, and I don't know you, if I know people that you're friends with, that's one thing. But otherwise, send me a little message that says, I saw you at Leader U. I will immediately confirm that friendship. I do most of my professional learning network, personal learning network on Twitter and Facebook, a little bit on Google+. So if you want to follow me, find me, ask me questions, those are one of 3 ways you can get in touch with me. Like this question about your social studies high school test. If you'll email that to me, I will see what kind of data is available for you to look at, and we'll look at that together. Okay? Any last questions? As we used to say in church, all hearts and minds are clear. All right, we're about to have an altar call, so let's all know. All right, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed Leader U. Have a great Saturday afternoon.